Hello everyone. Today I'm going to try and talk about one of the less talked about issues in finding your sense of self. And before I start the video, I wrote this all out on my laptop because it's the only way I can really keep track of what I'm trying to say. So sorry about that. I will be looking over here when we post the video. I would like to preface this by saying I am no psychologist. I'm not an expert in philosophy or human nature by any means. I'm just a human, and I've slowly been trying to learn how to appreciate what that means. And I want to share a little bit of what I've learned so far. Evidently, everyone seems to be obsessed with who they are. People are constantly trying to define themselves in some way or another. Sometimes it's things like your political ideology, religion, hobbies, social causes, family, friends, work. I could go on and on and on infinitely about all of the ways people try to create a curated personal identity, you know? I mean, you can probably tell a little bit of what mine is. Sometimes people even try to define themselves by their trauma. We all have these words that seem to kind of lock people into what make you you. Republican, Democrat, Independent, Socialist, Christian, Muslim, Minimalist, Maximalist. Again, the list goes on and on and on. And other elements that are tied to an individual's sense of self are things like values, opinions, and morals. When you're young, like me, in high school, middle school, college, there isn't a whole lot in the world a lot more intimidating than trying to figure out which combination of these is you. There's this sense of panic. Like, if I hang out with this individual, that's going to make these other individuals want to hang out with me. I'm trying to dress a certain way to fit in with these certain people. I'm trying to speak and use these certain words to be with these people. I'm trying to have these opinions, and I can't intermingle with people who have these opinions, because then what would that make me? We don't know who we are. Most of us don't even know how we want to be perceived exactly. We care so much about how we appear to others, and I think that when you're trying to figure out who you are, there are all these different categories you could fall into, and everyone seems to ignore the fact that under all that exploration, other people's perception of you is what drives most of the actual change. For context, I'm a visual artist. A lot of what I do is expressing myself with art. And I would say it's more abstract, definitely. Let me show you. I have these dogs and this, and I have a lot, but this is just kind of, So when I show people, like my family or therapists, they ask me, do I know what it means? Or they'll tell me, oh wow, and they'll tell me what they just know it means. And when they're telling me what I am trying to express and what I'm trying to say, of course it's not always going to resonate. And it goes the same way with trying to express complicated feelings, complicated thoughts. Other people always have their idea of what you're trying to say, and it's so difficult to make yourself understood to others sometimes. I heard a quote one time that I think about so frequently, and it's, other people will only understand you as deeply as they understand themselves. And when everyone is in the same unconscious predicament, you are not going to feel seen or heard and understood in the way you crave. So yeah, when the people who mean a lot to you tell you what your art means, what your words mean, the disappointment in not being understood is so great that you lose sight of your original intention. People sell themselves short all the fucking time to save themselves from the uncomfortable feeling of standing out in another person's eyes. This is a pretty weak example, but have you ever started a sentence about something relatable maybe, and another individual cuts you off and finishes your sentence for you because they think they know, what you're trying to say because it's relatable. But it's really not what you were trying to say at all. But you don't, most of the time, I don't ever, I do this to people sometimes. No one's ever stopped me and be like, actually, no, it's not what I meant. It's just so awkward, and I'm so sorry about my chair, it is so squeaky. Usually let it slide, whatever, and it could just be you don't want to make an awkward situation, but I think for a lot of people, correcting them is like separating yourself from that connection in a way, separating yourself from their mindset. There's that fear that maybe they won't accept you anymore. It's exaggerated for that example, but you can scale it to whatever makes sense. So I think when you're trying to figure out who you are, it's important to do a lot of work with getting over not being understood and allowing other people to perceive you incorrectly. And I think there's just so much freedom in that. And if you are ever doubting whether or not what I'm saying is true, look at all the people on the internet or at your lunch table or college classroom that look the same. Things like, if you don't know what this is, I'm so jealous, but things like the Bop House, or back in like 2018, whatever the Charli D'Amelio and their group, their house was, Hype House. Everyone's just looks the same. And there are different looks, but they're all the same look. And it's not a very original one. It's not very interesting. And that's because, obviously, you can't deny that the internet and social media makes people think about how they're being perceived a lot more. And when you're out there in the world nowadays, it's so wonderful, it's amazing that there's so much diversity. But there's so many differences and different ways of being all the time. So I think a lot of us have just started watering ourselves down. We get simpler and simpler. Look and words and song preferences and everything in between gets more mainstream and simple to make yourself more approachable. This is kind of a weird word for it, but digestible too, There's nothing uncomfortable about it. And I myself most definitely still struggle all the time with what I'm talking about. I care so much about what other people think of me, and I really wish I didn't. And there have been phases throughout the past few years where I've cared more and when I've cared less. I think for me, writing in a journal is helpful. Springtime is helpful. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm not really sure how exactly to go about this. I don't know what the right approach is to not giving a fuck anymore. I think a lot of the time, I just tell myself not to give a fuck, and it sort of works a little bit. But if you're at a similar point in your life, and you're trying to figure out who you are, please consider what I said in this video. And I hope I wasn't just yapping and, whatever. This is not really my specialty, but feel free to DM me, let me know where you're at in your self-discovery journey, or whatever. And if you have stuck around for this, thank you for listening. Good luck.